So far I've played over 100 games of Set 5, and naturally, some of those games have been 8th places. So if I can recognize when a game is going to be an 8th, I want to know. This way I can turn that around and hopefully end up with a 7th or 6th place instead. So what do all my 8th place games have in common? It's a mix of tilting, bad mental game, bad luck, small mistakes, and some big mistakes. In this video, I'll be breaking down all of those factors, but first, let's talk about why trying to avoid 8ths is so important for climbing and teamfight tactics. The main way to climb in TFT is to have a high average rank, and therefore we always want to play for as high of a placement as realistically possible. Average rank takes the last X amount of placements and gives you a number. If that number is higher than 4.5, you're climbing. If it is lower, you are demoting. And if it is around 4.5, you are stagnating. The best use of average rank is to look at your last 20 games. Here on lolchess.gg, I can see my last 20 and what my average rank is. It is currently 3.8, which means that on average I'm getting 4th place and sometimes 3rd in every game I play. And if we look at the graph, it is telling the same story. If all of those 6th and 7th places turn into 8th places, I get an average rank of 4.1. This is significantly worse, and I will have gotten way less LP per game if that were the case. This is why we sometimes have to cut our losses and play for top 6 instead of trying to chase an unrealistic top 4. You lose way less LP for a 6th than an 8th. Usually you lose about 20 to 25 for a 6th and around 45 for an 8th. But in some extreme cases, you can lose way more for an 8th. Just take a look at this guy who lost 94 LP for an 8th. So hopefully you understand now the importance of not going 8th place, and why this is just as important as getting top 4 or winning games when it comes to climbing. The point I'm trying to hammer home here is that you cannot win every single game, and you cannot top 4 every game either. So when you are in a really bad spot, you have to play for top 6, meaning the main goal of the game is just to try and not go 8th. So the rest of the video will be focusing on how we can do that. Yes, an 8th place does not mean you just got unlucky. Sometimes you made mistakes that ended up punishing you extremely hard. In my own 8th place games, I very often have inconsistent streaks, or I ping pong as some people call it. This means that I'm losing out on a ton of gold as I don't consistently win or loss streak in those games. The worst part is when you are on a big loss streak and you end up winning one round. Since my board in a lot of those cases is terrible, I end up losing even more rounds in the future ones. And because I won that one round, I ended up losing out on about 10 to 15 gold, which is terrible, as that is gold you generally need to come back into the game later. It is the equivalent of 5 to 7 shops for free at level 7 or 8, which can be enough to 2-star multiple units sometimes. Another big mistake is not spotting potential pivots or tunneling too hard on a single comp. This is something I do when there is one comp that is really strong in the current meta. Then I find myself forcing it a bit too hard and I'm completely blind to the other options. Don't get me wrong, forcing a comp can be the correct play in a lot of cases, but always make sure to be aware of your potential pivots. At the time of making this video, I have been forcing Cavalier Brand a lot to climb, mostly because the comp is often uncontested in my lobbies and it's also really strong, but also because it is a very easy comp to transition into from the early game. In those games where I don't top 4, it is because I'm tunneling too hard on it and I'm not being able to recognize my other options. Sure, you do need to understand the other comps you can pivot into before you do so, but at the same time you should know the own comp you are forcing and when you're not eligible to play your current comp due to the situation you are currently in. The last common mistake I make is lazy positioning and scouting. Scouting and positioning is crucial at all stages in TFT, but it is even more important when you're protecting big win streaks or loss streaks. If you're not aware that 2 people are jumping your carry with assassins, you're going to lose the round a lot of the time. And although this seems a little meaningless to bring up, I will still catch myself not scouting and positioning sometimes. Similarly, I'll occasionally catch other people off guard that don't scout, and it definitely doesn't make their spot any better. Although playing your best in every TFT game is hard, it is definitely possible if you play a limited amount of games. This is also a bonus tip for climbing. Only playing a few amount of games on your main account a day, then you can go experiment on your Smurf and bring the learnings over to your next games on your main account. Now let's be real. Sometimes 8th places are inevitable, as sometimes you just get too unlucky with your rolls or items. We have all had that experience of rolling more than 50 gold and not hitting the desired units, or playing an entire game without getting a single tier that we really need for our comp. Getting unlucky is just part of the game, and it happens to literally every single player from time to time. Therefore, a huge part of the skill expression in TFT is able to take that bad RNG and turn it into the best situation for yourself. One way to do this is to play to your outs. When you are in an unlucky spot, it is crucial to ask yourself this question: how can I realistically avoid 8th place from this spot? Playing to your outs is a common concept in similar games like Hearthstone and poker. In Hearthstone, sometimes you will never win if you play around a certain card in your opponent's deck. So in order to play to your outs, you need to pretend he just does not have that card in his hand, as if he does, you don't have a single way to win. Similarly in poker, if you got a really good opening hand, but then the flop makes your situation worse, you need to start thinking about if you can bluff your way out of it, or if you can afford to see the turn and river card in order to get bailed out. In TFT, the main way to play to your outs is to think about which comps you can play and which you cannot play. More specifically, which carries you can use and which you cannot use. Say you're rolling at level 7, and you have AP items. You're looking to play a Karma comp, but you end up hitting Vel'Koz's. You want to pick him up and run a suboptimal Vel'Koz 2-star over an optimal Karma 1-star. These will be situations where you don't have much of a choice. Say if you got unlucky rolls, you will have a limited amount of gold to keep rolling with. And a general rule is that the less gold you have, the more flexible you have to be with your options. Tilting or having bad mental game is also very commonly connected to an 8th place, and they are almost the same thing. Having bad mental game means that you're generally not focused or engaged in what you're doing. Tilting is similar, but a bit different. You can be in a good mental state, but then you get unlucky or something happens in the game that frustrates you and puts you into a bad mental state. I've already made a video where I talk specifically about tilting and how to overcome it, but the gist of it is, you get tilted because you get frustrated by something, that frustration turns into other emotions that take up your mental capacity. Since our brain is overwhelmed by all of these other emotions, it is harder to focus. And this lack of focus is what leads us to make big or small mistakes. And then these mistakes might make you even more tilted, as you know that you can do better than this. Once I get tilted, the main way I personally deal with it is to take deep breaths and walk around my room for about 10 to 15 seconds. This way I can try to regain focus and I work through the frustration. It definitely takes a bit of practice to get used to, but once you master this technique, it will help you regain focus so much more often. I also want to add that this is what works for me personally, so it might not work for you, but try to figure out a way to deal with tilt yourself. Whether that is smashing your keyboard or screaming into your pillow, whatever works for you is what you need to do. Another thing is that I have been playing variance games for a long time, and once you get bad RNG for the 10,000th time, it honestly doesn't bother me that much. I would be lying if I said it doesn't affect me, but it definitely doesn't throw me off my game as hard as it does for others. Because every time I get bad RNG, I know I will get good RNG in the future. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below what video you want me to make next, and if you want to get better at TFT, join the Discord. We got over 3,000 other players there who are hungry to climb, and if you want to get coached by me, the information is over on the Discord server as well. So take care and see you in the next video.